Landry Haryo Subianto. As you can see, I'm Chief Country Representative of the U.S. ASEAN Business Council, based here in Jakarta. I formerly work for the government of Indonesia at the Office of the President, as well as the Foreign Ministry, where I have a privilege really to serve one of the distinguished panelists here as his assistant. I will introduce that secret later. But anyway, welcome. This is one of the first panels of our CIFP this year. The title, as you can see, is very long. Who will be pushing for the agenda? Who will be pushing the global agenda? Renewing the primacy of multilateralism in a time of rivalry and populism. That's very mouthful, but the big question is do we have any global agenda? That's the thing, and I think multilateralism is the key answer to our, prolonged and existing problems, perennial conflicts that we are facing, or challenges that faced by the entire world. To discuss this, we are so happy and privileged, and I'm so honored to introduce our distinguished panelists here. First, of course, we have Dr. Hasan Wirayuda, and this is the person whom I alluded to earlier. I worked for Pak Hasan for 3 years, or nearly 4 years, as his assistant. Pak Hasan, everybody knows, is Minister for Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Indonesia from 2001 to 2009, and he was a member of the Indonesian Council of Presidential Advisors following after his term as Foreign Minister. And previously, he was Director General for Political Affairs. That's the heart of multilateralism in our foreign policy. At the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, he's a career diplomat, and he was an ambassador of Indonesia to the United Nations in Geneva. So I think, who else do we need to talk to, right, about multilateralism? So please give a big round of applause to Pak Hasan. And of course, the second speaker is Ambassador Vincent Piquet. I hope I pronounced your name correctly. Pak Piquet is the ambassador of the European Union to Indonesia and Brunei Darussalam, and as I understand it, you just arrived 2.5 months ago. Welcome to Indonesia, Pak Piquet. I know it's very important for you. But obviously, before coming to Indonesia, he was head of Algeria, Libya, head division for Algeria, Libya, Morocco, and Tunisia, Middle East, and North Africa department. Very important post. And also head of the European Union Office to Hong Kong, Macau, Special Administrative Regions in the People's Republic of China. And he was also an ambassador and head of delegations to Malaysia, of the EU to Malaysia. So you know the region, you know the multilateralism. So welcome again, Pak Vincent. Big round of applause to Pak Vincent. And the third speaker is, everybody knows, of course, the Sri Kandi of our foreign policy as well, Ibu Professor Dewi Fortuna Anwar. Who else? Ibu Dewi Fortuna is a research professor at the Indonesian Institute of Sciences, or LIPI. But before that, she was a distinguished visiting professor at Nanyang Technological University in Singapore, and deputy for government policy support to the Vice President of the Republic of Indonesia. And of course, she was also a member of the United Nations Secretary General Advisory Board on Disarmament Matters. So, and also, Ibu, if I may recall, you were always associated with the late Professor Habibie, Ibu, our respect.
And a co-founder of FPCI.
And also, Ibu is the co-founder of FPCI. Big round of applause to Ibu Dewi Fortuna. The fourth speaker is Professor Ken Jimbo, Senior Research Fellow at Cannon Institute for Global Studies. Pak Ken, Professor Ken Jimbo is my oldest friend. We've been known since 2000, each other. And Professor Jimbo is also visiting professor at Thammasat University, and also senior advisor to the National Security Secretariat Advisory Board of the Government of Japan since 2018. And last but not least, of course, our last speaker would be Professor Cheng Yawen. Welcome, Professor Cheng Yawen. Professor of the School of International Relations and Public Affairs, Shanghai International Studies Universities. So I think without further ado, Pak, we will start our discussion by giving all distinguished panelists about 2-3 minutes of kicking statements. Of course, the question is really, do we have still faith in multilateralism? Is multilateralism a panacea to our perennial problems and those sort kind of things? Please, Bapak, the time is yours for 2 or 3 minutes, Bapak. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Palandri. Colleagues, panelists, distinguished participants, students. In 2015, Richard Haass from the U.S. Council of Foreign Relations wrote a book titled "The World is in Disarray." Since 2017, President Trump made our world more disarray. Under the slogans of America First, America, the United States gives primacy to bilateralisms and has a distaste of multilateralisms. America withdrew from many multilateral forums, human rights councils, withdrew from TPP, but also climate change conventions, abrogated the bilateral nuclear treaty with Russia, the IMF, and many others. And of course, this affect and in a way strengthens the recedings of multilateralisms. But the United States, which also withdrew from its traditional role since 1945 to be the leader of the what's called the world liberal order. In other words, we don't have any leader to replace the United States. Is China in a position to replace the United States as the world leader? I don't think so. In January this year, President Xi Jinping said at the WTO, United States, rather China is ready to be the leader of on world trade. But China itself now has problems, mainly because of the trade war with the United States. Of course, it's not only the question of Trump's or others, but rather in the past 5 years, there's been growing populism and narrow nationalism. Of course, at the expense of multilateralism. Look what has happened in Europe, in the United States itself, whereby under the theme of populist policy and nationalism in the negative sense, the traditional, rather the developed democracies are now having problems. In the end, also affect democracy development promotion in the world, and democracy also is in decline. But we cannot simply blame the United States or the populisms and narrow nationalisms. But the very basis of the existing world order, which was developed since 1945 under the UN Charter, is also becoming more effective. And the political security, look what's happened in the Middle East. Conflict in Syria took place for 6 years. 600 people were killed. Millions were displaced or become refugees. The Security Council, which is mandated for the maintenance of international peace and security, didn't do anything. Not only Syria, Yemen, and the old conflicts, Libya, Somalia, and others are forgotten. So there's a clear sense of the ineffectiveness of the global order on peace and security. On the economic side, since 2008 global economic crisis, we have witnessed the weakening of the global economics governance. Bretton Woods institution, the World Bank and IMF, practically is much less effective. But what would be the alternative? BRICS initiated a regional fund or global fund, but so far, because they have their own problem as well, it's not inside to replace the weakening. So the key words here is to reform. I participated since the first UN reform in 1995 and the subsequent summit. I now give up my hopes on the possibility of we can reform. But likewise, the Bretton Woods, the G20, since London 2000, promised to reform the Bretton Woods institutions. But I haven't heard since then. Why? Because reforms in the end means the redistribution of power. And those who have power and privilege, in the Security Council, the P5 with its veto, certainly those who have enjoyed those privileges, they won't give up their power. Likewise, did I end?
1 minute.
1 minute, okay. Likewise on the global economic governance. So when the reform is not possible, how then the future world order? I share the views of Dr. Henry Kissinger. In absence of widely shared global order, then the future of global order would comprise of regional and regional orders. Here is, of course, we count on the European Union that which since 1957 developed its own, now European, from community to the unions. And now European Union also has big problems. Brexit is one indicator, but there are many others. ASEAN, so far so good. And we're working with our partners in East Asia to develop an East Asia community. RCEP is good decisions because in a world of protectionisms and other restrictions, we declare, as RCEP, ASEAN, East Asia declared, we are for free trade and trade by rules. So that's the world we are living. And hopefully it will still work better for us. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. That was a very powerful statement, Pak Hassan. As always, you always be very frank in your opinion, Bapak, ever since you were a Minister of Foreign Affairs, because I think without your push, there will be no progress in ASEAN as well, Pak, especially in human rights and stuff. But anyway, for those who are just trickling in, it seems to me that the message from Pak Hassan is, do we need a champion or a global power to proceed with multilateralism? Do we have champion at the moment? But also you end with a very nice point, Pak, about the regional order, and that suits you, Pak Vincent, because Europe is now one of the hopes for multilateralism. And perhaps on that note, I would like to invite you to give your opening statement, Pak, for 2-3 minutes, maybe 4. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Absolute pleasure to be here with you this morning. I haven't seen a conference like this anywhere in the world, so it's absolutely great, and congratulations to FPCI. I speak from the vantage point of the European Union, and our backdrop, of course, is that we are probably one of the staunchest supporters of the multilateral order in the world for very, very obvious reasons. First of all, historical and ideological, that later, after 1989, of course, expanded to the east and reunited the fractured Europe that had emerged from the World War II. So, secondly, we are firm supporter of the multilateral order because ourselves, despite our size, 28 member states currently, size of our economy, if you count the EU together, we rival the US for the first place on the world ranking list in terms of size of the economy. Despite all that, we are not a hard power broker. We have no armies to send into countries. We have no nuclear weapons. And so everything we want to achieve in the world for stability, for security, for policy reasons, has to be through soft power. And the primary instrument that we have for doing that is the multilateral system. It's very much in our genes to support it. It's also in our law. Our founding treaty refers to the values of the United Nations, refers to the obligation of the EU and member states to align themselves with the UN principles. The UN Court, the ICC, we are a founding member of the WTO, etc., etc. So if just to mention, the multilateral system as it is, the UN as it is, were to be dismantled, we would have a major job to do of legislative adaptation. We would need an omnibus law, a very large one, a double-decker omnibus, to adjust our legal reality to such a situation. That's one. And secondly, of course, the world doesn't change. The needs remain the same, dealing with regional crises and with climate change and tax evasion. So we would need to rebuild in a different way the very same thing that one was dismantled. Because that's our bottom line, that our conviction that we need a multilateral system to solve today's problems. Now, the regional crisis is one, and it's evident that the multilateral system has not been successful at solving the crises in Syria and Libya, in Mali, etc. But still, there are thematic issues to solve. The climate, next week in Madrid, the next climate conference, thousands and thousands of people gathering there to try and make that work and to adjust to the reality of having one member less in the Paris Agreement. Disarmament, arms control, tax evasion, it all requires multilateral action if you want to get a result. So it's a fundamental drive for the EU to work within the multilateral order, within the UN system, and in support of it. Last point I'll make is indeed the multilateral system is in trouble. There is something not functioning, that's evident. Partly it has to do with political and military behavior of countries that no longer fits into multilateral order, that is a unilateral system, if that is a system. So we have to recognize that and come to terms with it. The second real fact, big fact, is the shift in economic power in the world. Previously, the rich West typically was holding all the strings to power. Now, of course, the economic center has moved east. That's clear. And the East rightfully wants its role in the multilateral order, and that is an understandable wish and drive. And lastly, I would say Africa, close is our neighbor country. It's a massive continent with currently 2 billion inhabitants, going up to 4 by 2050. This is another rising power for the coming period, for decades, that of course also will wish to see its role reflected. So it brings me to the point that
Maybe you have 1 more minute.
1 minute, that the role we can play as regionals. I do believe that in the absence of stability with imperfect stability at the level of the global multilateral system, the regional systems have a major job to do. And that is through integration, through building a community of common interests, common values, common economic interests, trade, climate affairs, etc. Create zones of peace, of stability, and prosperity that constitute the building blocks for a stable multilateral order. Without a doubt, the EU wishes to be one, and without a doubt, we believe that ASEAN can do so as well. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Pak Vincent. Another powerful message, regionalism is the building block, actually, perhaps to a new multilateralism. And we really would like to see you succeed in its process now, Pak, because EU is definitely one of the very few pillars for global multilateralism. And that also brings me, of course, to our third speaker, an expert on ASEAN. But again, the middle power here would play a very critical role, just like Pak Vincent mentioned. And I would like to invite you to give your opening statement on this. Thank you, Ibu.
Thank you, Mas Landry. Following up on Pak Hassan and Pak Vincent, whenever elephants fight or they make love, they say, it's always the grass that gets trampled. So whenever superpowers, major powers get into conflict, the losers, the primary losers, are always the middle and the small powers. So because in bilateral relations, the smaller powers, the middle powers will always be placed in a relative disadvantage in any asymmetrical relations. So therefore, I would like to emphasize this is the moment that we need to seize as a middle power moment. Because now, unlike in the post-World War II, where there are only a few middle powers, there are now an increasingly large numbers of middle powers and increasingly diverse types of middle powers as well, and also with increasing capacity. So we should not simply allow the presence of middle powers to be followers, to be used as proxy theaters for conflicts and so on, but instead to take this opportunity to seize leadership. Now, when you view international relations, now I'm no longer a government bureaucrat here, mostly, I like to be as an IR analyst. When we look at international relations, most policymakers only look at it through realist perspectives. Actually, it would be very interesting. There's an important book by Alexander Wendt about the social constructions of international relations. How we see the world is not a given. It is constructed. Therefore, international relations also is constructed. Do you see others as enemies, as rivals, or as friends? Those who look at others with fear and always fear competition and always wants to arm itself based on suspicions, this is called the Hobbesian powers. And they will always want to focus on narrow national interests and emphasize on high politics, security, and so on. Those who view the world more positively, but still highlighting competition, but cooperation is also important, is called Lockean. So while emphasizing high politics, they can also work on more low politics. But there are others who tend to look more positively. Maybe this is unrealistic, but there are others who look at the world as friends, not as enemies. And therefore, there is a tendency to focus more on low politics, on welfare issues, and so on. So this is called the Kantian. And now there's a new body of scholarship about middle powers in Asia Pacific, where the middle powers are typified as you are the Hobbesian powers, or the Lockean powers, and Kantian powers. And my new thesis, I've just come out with an article, is that Indonesia is a typology of a Kantian middle power. The million friends, zero enemies under Pak SBY. And now the basis of our foreign policy is not based on enmity, but that's assumptions of friendship. And this, I think, this is the one that Ibu Retno has been trying to say. So through individual activism, through coalition of like-minded countries, whether through regional cooperation, through minilateralism, through pluralitarianism as building blocks to materialism, the middle powers should seize the moment. Because the niche of middle power diplomacy is, of course, bridge building, facilitation, mediation, and low politics. So the high politics are not going to disappear. But creating trust, it has to start with functional cooperations. And that's what EU did through the steel and coal cooperation between France and Germany. That is how ASEAN did it. We avoided high politics. We avoided talks about security. It's only since 2000 that we adopted the agenda on politics and security. Before that, it was mostly low politics. So this is, it may not be sexy, but as I said, the coalition of the willing among middle powers should create more space. So who is going to be the champion? It will be the middle powers. What are the modalities? It will be through multilateralism, pluralitarianism, and regional organizations. And EU and ASEAN are the two important building blocks toward global peace and multilateralism. So as I said, what is the answer to the world in this race? It needs to be mitigated through seizing the middle power moment. Thank you.
Excellent, Ibu. Thank you very much. I think that is a very, I'm glad we have 4 powerful messages now. The last one would be carpe diem, seize your moment. That's exactly for middle power to seize the moment by creating coalition of the willing. But perhaps, Ibu, as a devil advocate in this forum, Ibu, in the era of social media and mass, media coverage, low politics seems to be very, hard to sell. And people die almost on a daily basis, for instance, in Yemen, and even a country who violates UN resolutions for 32 times since 1968 were not punished at all. So I think this will also give another challenge, Ibu. The Hobbesian world is still there, so we have 2 worlds in parallel now. To discuss that further, we have Professor Ken Jimbo, my oldest friend, among my oldest friends here. Please, Professor Jimbo, from the perspective of maybe friends to global, to major power. Thank you.
Well, I'm very grateful to be invited here to this conference, and always a great pleasure to be back in Jakarta, and also had an opportunity to see my good friend Larry to chair this session. Whenever we try to organize the conference like this in Tokyo, the majority of audiences are average 70 years old. But now I see so many younger generations attending this conference, listen very carefully about the future of the multilateralism. This is a great sign. And also, I find the very positive, like a population dynamics and energy that is emerging in Indonesia. This is my, the great findings of today as well. As a relatively older generations than you guys, I think my role is to share some of the historical and theoretical lessons why multilateralism is constantly facing the challenges. And I would say this is a totally not a totally new phenomena, because throughout the history, multilateralism has been faced with a lot of challenges in the period of time. And I will try to share with you that there has been a major 3 patterns why multilateralism is in trouble. First of all, and I think foremost, multilateral format normally designed by major powers at the time of foundation, but it is often inflexible to adapt to the influence of rising powers. So Dino, mentioned about Thukydides trap things. The incumbent power is always being challenged by major powers, and that will bring about the systemic challenges. And why would they need to, face with the systemic challenges? Because normally the existing power are not flexible enough to adapt to the new norms and the change of the distribution of power, which rising power will try to address in the world system. So, in other words, the failure to solve the mismatch between dynamics of the distribution of power vis-a-vis institution is the one big patterns of the failure of the multilateralism. So, imagine if People's Republic of China, today's China, was not the permanent member of the Security Council. Fortunately, they've got the status in 1972 with the diplomatic, shuffles of the United States and China, and become the permanent member. And China has becoming the nation who supports the multilateralism and also the UN system. If China was not the permanent member, I don't think that China will sustain that kind of stance as of today. So that was very, I think, important kind of historical lessons to be learned. The second reason of the breakdown is the issue of efficiency. How efficient the multilateral institution can play in addressing and solving the problem. Generally speaking, the more players join the club, it is very harder to make a collective decisions. And if you have 20 friends, it is very hard to decide whether you want to go to Disneyland or go to the mountains or the beaches. And it's a matter of the decision-making processes. And so when the global trade rules, like general agreement and tariffs and trade, try to organize a global kind of a free and open trade and investment system, has to be updated with a tighter and higher institutional rule-based organization in order to manage 100 member states and even so, WTO today is facing deep troubles. So multilateralism can be the place not to coordinate players' interest, but sometimes it's effectively divide the interest in order to not to make a decision. So because sometimes at the multilateralism under that framework, the player can be spoiler or disruption, because sometimes multilateralism has to go through the rules of majority or sometimes rules of the consensus. If you have a consensus rules, the one player can be the spoiler, because if you say no, the collective decision could not be made. So it is a matter of the efficiency, always the issue of looking at the function of the multilateralism. And the third, and what seems to be the new trend, is the decline of the trust in the diplomacy and so-called the elite politics. And I think the benefit of the multilateralism can be found in so-called non-visible and the long-term effect by having a common rules and practices. So if you are in the foreign services, if you're in the university, you can actually learn a lot of lessons why the multilateral solution is so important, because you have to have a rules, you have to have a foundations, and that has to be embedded. Whoever comes into the power, that rules and institutions still exist. So you can have a better predictability how to solve the issues throughout the formats. But when you look at the voters of today, like farmers in the United States and workers in the Mid East in the Rust Belt, they don't seems to be paying so much premiums on such kind of continuous game under the multilateralism. They want to have a visible and the short-term benefits and the solution. And this is, I think, another bad time for the multilateralism under the populist kind of trends in the elections and also in the governance. So these are my three basic stories why today's multilateralism in trouble. And let me have 1 minute and how do we have to deal with it. And quickly, 3 points. And I think that the maximum effort to constantly reform the institution, including members' rules and procedures, to adapt rising powers is always important. And so you're not only sending invitations to those rising powers, but you need to accept the rising influence of the major powers. The formation of the G20 is so important, but you also have to reform UN, you have to also reform IMF and also financing institution, including ADB and so on. These are, I think, very important. And second, develop multilateralism as a place to make a good decision. is also very important. Imagine there are student card and platinum card issues. So students, you can have a credit card, but with a student status, right? And if you become a rich, you can apply for the platinum card. And I think there's so much difference between how much you can spend with your credit card, but you really need to have a credit and your trust in your financial situation. So it is very important that asking everyone to join in the club in the multilateralism, but you also have to get the beta premium why you should be in the multilateral institution because you have a platinum card. EU used to be like that, right? And everybody wished to join the EU because EU is a platinum card membership. And for that, you can really ask the other European members, you have to have a better economic performance and you have to have a better governance and human rights record in order to become a platinum card members. I think those kind of multilateral efforts is very important. And last 30 seconds. And I think finally, the multilateralism has to be aggressive in order to achieve geopolitical or geoeconomic objectives. And sometimes such multilateral design can be exclusive to make specific actor out of the loop. But why not having a multiple exclusive grouping, one with the United States and one with China? Well, that's exactly what the Dino mentioned this morning. In order to make a multilateral institution effective, you have to have a certain objectives and motivations to deal with it. But sometimes that can be very exclusive. So players like middle powers can have a kind of both kind of engagement from United States, China, and other actors to simultaneously let those different multilateral frameworks to play a relevant role. And those are, I think, the one of the solution or the format how to revitalize the multilateralism in today's world. I'll stop here. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Jimbo. Solutions, the logic of collective action is always difficult ever since NATO was founded and also UN. But thank you for your three solutions, alternative solutions to proceed with multilateralism. In the interest of time, Professor Chang, last but not least, of course, please have a opening statements for about 2-3 minutes, and then we can have an exchange of views here. Please, Pa.
OK，感谢主持人，也感谢各位嘉宾。很抱歉，我不能用英语来回答，我要请我的学生朱超来代替我做出回答。
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I want to thank the host and the CIFP. It's great remark on multilateralism, and we see many audience and just want to share our ideas about the global order. And as we all know, since 2008, the global financial crisis, the world is enter an age of uneasy peace and the populism and the economic challenges is always disturbing us, and we might question about is the multilateralism or global governance is still continue to be our top topic in our global politics, and is that the end of a peaceful international order? And I don't think so. And some people may think the order is almost like 100 years ago. And I think historical analogies sometimes is useful, but may be misleading. Although China have some conflicts with the United States, but we don't want the new Cold War. We still uphold the multilateralism. We support an international system based on UN and international law. And we still recognize that the middle power can play an important role than ever before, like the ambassador, the minister have emphasized. And last, I want to emphasize that Alexander Winter has said anarchy is what states made of it. And I want to say the populism and the great competition about own great nations is also made by the United States. And it doesn't mean that we must accept it, and we have many ways to solve it. And now we are embracing a new type of multilateralism because it's the real multilateralism. With both actors can play an important role, like individuals, like international organizations, like regional organizations. Both of us can do many things to contribute to this. So from the philosophy, we don't need to worry too much about the world where it dropped into the new Cold War. And the human society always learn lessons from the history. And I think we can have many cooperations and coordinations. Thank you.
Thank you. Wonderful. Thank you. So it's glad to know that China still believes in the global multilateral order, which is really really good. But again, the whole discussion here seems to be rallied on the possibility and opportunity given to China, really, to shape the order, just like Ken Jimbo mentioned, just like Pak Hassan mentioned about power shift and everything. Also, Pak Vincent and also Ibu Devi Fortuna mentioned about the chance for the middle powers to do this. And China is, of course, consider themselves still as a middle power to do this. But again, the opportunity seems to be like very slim. Of course, in the interest of time, we should have actually a kind of an internal discussion, but I would like, of course, to be flexible and ask audience if you have any questions. Wow, okay, we have a lot of questions. Well, only 2, but please ask more. Please state your name and also who your questions are directed to, okay? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the amazing information that you shared today. My name is Vita Aini. My question is to Indonesian speaker and also all the speaker, if you can share your insight about this issue. I want to raise one of the hot issues that we have this year, which is US and Iran. As we notice that this issue is getting hotter, especially after the drone attack in Saudi Aramco's oil tank. The US oil company ConocoPhillips sold their share of Barossa project in Australia to the Santos Australian oil company, and it could be more than this. I want to ask, will Iran be the second of Iraq? Will US frame that they are as victim again, but intentionally they get benefit after attacking rich oil country like Iraq? Yesterday news from the Gulf News, the title is, with the boosted US military presence, Iran will think twice about attacking Saudi
Okay, maybe
Arabia.
you can be very brief in your question.
And I want to give the subtitle that Pentagon moves forward with the defense mission to protect the kingdom from Iranian attack. So the question is, who is attacking who in this case?
Okay.
Okay. Now my question is for Indonesian speakers. What is the best foreign policy for Indonesia regarding this issue? Will we support Iran, although in this largest Sunni majority country, see us is never always has place here, or we are with the Donald Trump policy?
Okay,
That's for Indonesian speaker. And to all the speakers, after discussing pro and cons of multilateralism system, what is the best solution beyond of this? How we can address this? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So my name is Rismanto Salim and I'm from Jakarta. So basically when we talk about multilateralism, we always look on a high-level diplomacy. But the topic on multilateralism also affect in our society, literally. So my question is, what can a state actor can do to involve in multilateralism issue? And the second, does people-to-people connection or para-diplomacy will reduce rivalry and populism issue? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Actually, the issue is not only between the US and Iran, but also Iran and Saudi Arabia.
Yes.
And the prime cause is the efforts of Iran, at least allegedly, to develop its nuclear weapons. So Indonesia has principled positions. During my time as foreign minister in the mid-2000s, Iran case was a central issue because we support Iran like we support other countries to develop nuclear technology for peaceful purposes. But we are against, Iran efforts to develop nuclear weapons. So in this case, actually we support Indonesia, Indonesian people, support the agreements it was reached between G7 and Iran. I think that's good agreements. But as the U.S. has no taste of multilateralism, withdrawing from anything, U.S. withdrew from these agreements, and the situation now back to square one. And of course, in the rivalries on leadership in the Middle East, Saudi Arabia is not comfortable with this status quo, likewise Israel. The possibility of the U.S. attacking Iran like the U.S. attacked Syria, I don't think Iraq, I don't think this would be the case. But certainly it creates new tension, like the case of drone attack to Saudi oil facilities. This is the damage of that also created by the U.S. has no taste for multilateralism. And those who are very close to be settled, now back to square one, making the regions is more unstable.
Thank you. Pak Vincent, there is a question about the people to people, and I know you touch upon the soft power, the importance of soft power. How do you tackle the question part, please?
I would say that, first of all, one has to start building multilateralism at home. And at home, you make the policies for the citizens. And at home, you pass the messages, the political messages that you wish for your country. You educate your young people in schools, outside the schools, and thereby create a society. And the key thing, leadership matters. Let's put it like that. It matters whether your leadership, the government, the president, the king, passes a message of peace, stability, of engagement, of friendly relations, of good neighborliness, of cooperation versus everything that is the opposite of that. And so that is one. Secondly, exchange and across borders. If anything, what Europe has learned is that we need to bring young people together across the borders, and we do that a lot. Many of you will know the big Erasmus exchange program of the EU, and which has exchanged within Europe 30 million young people up to now. 30 million. Now, that's a lot, because those are the students, the young business people, the young government officials, the political young elite. So that is a massive critical mass. And lastly, civil society, key role to play. We see that right now very, very clearly. Populism is there. There is a resentment against globalization, against immigration and so on, among many people. But there remains a hardcore of positive civil society. You see that in the streets in the European capitals every day, with the young people pushing climate change. You see that the other day in Paris with masses and masses of people protesting against violence against women, etc., etc. So that is a massive force for action, and for that reason, it's vital that the governments create a good climate for them.
Thank you, Pak Vincent. Ibu, Bu Devi, please, because you also touch upon a bit of non-state actor and others. Please.
You know, the whole idea behind this FPCI and this conference on Indonesian foreign policies is precisely to show that foreign policy, international relations is so important. It touches the lives of everyone, and really, it is extremely important for the younger generation, not for those over 70, right? The over 70s make wars, but it is the 18 to 30 who have to fight and die. And I think that what is so important, the role of non-state actors in international relations now is not a sideshow. It is no longer a footnote. Amitav Achaya wrote about our world as a multiplex world. Most of discussions about international relations still only talk about conventional relations, about state-to-state relations, and about interstate issues, high politics, which actually distract us from the common challenges that we as humanity face. We in the planet face the issues of climate change, the issues of poverty, the issues of, this is rising intolerance, terrorism, and so on, which face all of us, regardless of whether you're United States or China or peace-loving Indonesia. We are all faced with this. So what would be the role of the non-state actors to continue to remind the policymakers of the real bread and butter issues. So do not only focus on buying more arms, but on how to educate your people, provide healthcare, provide education, provide better lifestyle, and also, making sure that the media that we have believe it really leads to democracy 3.0 and not new populism, 3.0. So in this sense, I cannot emphasize enough the role of the young people and the saliency of non-traditional security. So this is a role that actually mitigate. This is the areas that can force us to do cooperation, while the Thucydides traps only focuses on this, on traditional power politics. Regard that as passé, as old man's games. Do something different.
Thank you, Ibu. Actually, Ibu, when you said democracy 3.0, our industry is now already 4.0. Democracy is 3.0, but security is still 1.0. I think we need to change that, and I think you have to have a new mindset after this discussion. We have more than 200 young people here. Of course, we consider all of you young, Pa. Young with the gray hairs and stuff. But this is very important. Pak Ken, Pak Jimbo, you mentioned also about democracy's effect on multilateralism. And I think I would like to invite you, perhaps if we can move, how really democracy can affect all these questions.
As previous speakers mentioned, that unfortunately the democracy is in the constant decline. According to the global NGO Freedom House report, you can find that the report saying that the democracy has been in decline for past 13 years constantly. And there has been a reason for this. First of all, there has been a great performance of authoritarian regimes led by China and others. And then, the past kind of premises that if the people gets rich and the nation goes higher, that governance style has to be pluralized because there's lots of interest will be diverse in the society, and the authoritarian regime will never, survive. So that's the great stories of Asia, the Philippines, Indonesia, Myanmar. All the regime has been pluralized, and that's the kind of great story we have, but not in the other parts of the world. And that's one. And secondly, also we have been finding a low performance of the advanced democracy. So like United States, UK, in Japan. Actually, the demographic patterns in those advanced society has been in a very bad shape because of the we are in the aging society. Distribution patterns without the economic growth has become a very difficult political agenda. So if you have a majority rules, the majority are are the elderly societies, and that's not good news for the younger generation. That's the second reason why the democracy is not performing very well. And the third reason is that even the democracy has been going on with the so-called populist autocracy and the populist dictatorship in many parts of the world. So that popular support is very important in the democracy, but who votes and creates those kind of motivations are actually led by those, like a popular movements, because we are in a very diverse society, but who gets the kind of cluster of the popular votes have been the people who are not in the globalization movement. So people has a lots of kind of, entity, and those people have a strong political voice over it. So again, I can only show you about the very negative stories about how to support the multilateralism. And I think we really need to find a solution, how those kind of decline of the democracy and the governance styles and the bring back the multilateralism motivation back in power needs to be, I think, the huge agenda that we need to solve.
Thank you very much, Professor Jimbo. And of course, last but not least, Professor Chang. But I don't know which part of questions you would like to respond, but please.
Thank you very much. And as I have mentioned, that China supports the multilateral internationalism based on UN and China, EU and BRICS and ASEAN will be the leader of the global governance. Thus, we have 4 ways to achieve it. First, and China first avoiding the new Cold War with the US. You know, China don't want the new Cold and the confrontation between the US and China because it's too dangerous for our world. And great power strategic competition doesn't mean a zero-sum game. China has its own philosophy about harmony world, a world with harmony, and we still believe the global governance. And second, I think no one will enjoy the bitter of a highly confrontational and binary system, which is anachronism and old and dangerous old-fashioned concept. And the pursuit of self-fulfilling prophecy of comprehensive containment is unacceptable. And the second, I think the second is promoting the first industrial revolution together. You know, the emancipation of productivity is our regional momentum for our economic growth. And during the past 3 times of industrial revolution is led by the Western countries. And now we can do these things together in West and East. This is really important to solve the problem and the origin of populism or the democracy dilemma. And the third, when we're talking about the new type of multilateralism, I think we need to embrace a new type of globalization. The neoliberalism globalization has produced an uneven world. The gap between rich and poor, the resentment, the hatred, the animosity, and the emptiness during the domestic politics and international politics. This is really dangerous and bring us to an uncertain state. And we want to promote a globalization that all countries can engage in, and we must protect the little country or the people who lost in the globalization. And especially we must put the role of state in a high ground because the states still remain an important role in dealing with the populism and multilateralism. And our politics can't be hijacked by the capital, by the super rich. Yes. And this is the unstable rules. And last but not least, we still respect the normative powers. And we humans have been have been gone through so many tears and blood, and we learn lessons from history. As we know, today, no country can solve their problems single-handedly. So, the shared future for humankind is not just an idea; it's a fact.
Sure.
So we want to
Thank you.
bring it together.
Thank you very much. I am constantly reminded that our time is only 1 minute by the timekeeper who is standing there, the beautiful lady in the white. But having said that, I think we cover a lot of grounds, and I'm sorry if we don't have any more time to entertain more questions, although there are more than 200 people around here. Oh, okay. I think we have to close the session, unfortunately. With more questions, actually. We have more questions than answers, but that's a sign of a good discussion. Who should push the global agenda? Definitely, I think it's everyone, especially the younger generation, just like Ibu Dewi mentioned. And what are the global agenda? Definitely multilateralism itself. I guess unless you do have, 10 seconds to say something, Bapak or Ibu? You okay? Pak Vincent, you want to say something very quickly, or? Oh, of course. Okay, I think let's give the big round of applause to all our panelists, and thank you for your active participations and also attention. Thank you.